Some things aren't meant for the world. They don't need witnesses, applause, or proof. They live quietly between two hearts that understand silence as well as words. What we share is one of those things. A secret, not because it's hidden in fear, but because it's protected by trust. This is about the space between us where time slows down, where a look says more than 1,000 promises. It's about the truth we never had to explain, the bond that didn't ask for permission to exist. Tonight, I'm not here to reveal that secret to everyone. I'm here to honor it, because some love stories are strongest when they're whispered, not shouted. I never planned to speak about this because what we have was never meant to be explained. It existed before language tried to name it. It lived in pauses, in the calm after laughter, in the way the world softened when you were near. This secret between us was not built from dramatic moments or loud promises. It grew quietly, the way strong things always do, unnoticed by those who were too busy watching the noise of life. It was formed in the way our eyes met without searching, in the way time seemed to step aside when we shared the same space. Nothing needed to be said, because everything important was already understood. There is a kind of silence that feels empty, and then there is the silence we share. Ours is full. It carries meaning, memory, intention. When we sit together without words, it's not absence, it's presence in its purest form. In that silence, I hear you. I hear your fears that you never speak out loud, your strength that you never boast about, your love that doesn't need to be proven. This secret lives there, in the quiet moments that no one else notices, moments that would look ordinary to the world but feel infinite to us. It's the silence that doesn't ask questions, that doesn't demand answers, that simply exists because it belongs to us. Trust didn't arrive suddenly. It wasn't handed over in a single moment. It was earned slowly, breath by breath, choice by choice. Every time you stayed when leaving would have been easier. Every time you listened instead of judging. Every time you held space for my truth without trying to change it. That's how this secret became safe. Not hidden, not locked away, but protected. Trust turned vulnerability into something strong. It allowed us to be real without fear of being reduced, to be seen without being exposed. In your presence, I didn't need armor. I didn't need a script. I could simply be, and that was enough. What we share doesn't compete with the world. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to be displayed or defended. It exists because we chose it, again and again, even on days when choosing was difficult. Especially on those days. This secret is not an escape from reality, it's what grounds me in it. When everything feels uncertain, I return to the truth of us. To the knowing that there is someone who understands my quiet, who recognizes my shadows without being afraid of them. Someone who doesn't try to fix me, but stands beside me while I fix myself. There is power in choosing privacy in a world that demands exposure, in keeping something sacred instead of making it public. Our secret isn't built on secrecy alone, it's built on respect. Respect for what love becomes when it's allowed to grow without interference, when it isn't shaped by expectations or measured by standards that were never meant for it. What we have is ours because we protected it, because we didn't let outside voices rewrite its meaning. We listened to each other instead. We trusted the quiet truth over the loud opinion. Sometimes I think about how rare this kind of connection is. Not the kind that burns fast and fades, but the kind that stays. The kind that sits with you in stillness and doesn't feel the need to perform. The kind that understands that love isn't always intense. Sometimes it's steady. Sometimes it's just being there, showing up without announcement, without conditions. This secret between us holds all of that. The fire and the calm, the longing and the peace. It holds the parts of us we don't show anyone else. Not because they're weak, but because they're precious. I don't carry this secret as a burden. I carry it as a promise that what we share is real enough to stand on its own, that it doesn't need the world's permission to exist, that it survives in honesty, in patience, in the quiet courage of staying true to each other. When I look at you, I don't see a mystery I need to solve. I see a truth I've already accepted, and in that acceptance there is freedom. Freedom to love without fear, to trust without hesitation, to stay without questioning why. This secret doesn't isolate us. It connects us more deeply. It creates a space where we can breathe, where we can rest, where we can be unguarded. A space where time feels less heavy, where the future doesn't rush us, where the past doesn't define us. It's just us, meeting in the middle of everything, choosing each other without explanation. And in that choice, over and over, this secret continues to live, to grow, to hold us exactly where we are. Trust didn't arrive as a promise spoken out loud. It showed up quietly, the way real things do, without asking for attention. It was there in the moments when nothing dramatic happened, when there was no test announced, no clear line drawn. It grew in ordinary time, in shared hours that didn't try to impress anyone. I trusted you not because you said the right things, but because your presence stayed consistent when words would have been easier than actions. There was a calm certainty in knowing that what you meant was never hidden behind exaggeration or performance. Trust beyond words is built when explanations become unnecessary, when I don't have to rehearse my thoughts before sharing them with you, when silence doesn't feel like distance but like understanding. I noticed it the first time I iled to be strong in front of you and nothing changed. You didn't step back, you didn't look for excuses. You stayed exactly where you were as if weakness didn't lower my value in your eyes. In that moment, something solid formed, something that didn't depend on reassurance or repeated confirmation. There's a kind of trust that asks questions constantly, that needs proof every day. Ours is different. It rests. It doesn't panic when time passes or when life becomes loud. It knows that distance doesn't erase intention and that quiet doesn't mean absence. I trust you in the spaces where doubt usually lives, in the pauses between messages, in the days when energy runs low, in the moments when neither of us knows what to say. That trust doesn't demand clarity, it allows uncertainty without fear. What makes this trust strong is that it doesn't try to control. There is no need to hold tightly when you believe something won't disappear. I don't watch your steps, and you don't measure mine. We move freely, knowing the direction remains the same. That freedom is not careless, it's earned. It comes from knowing that loyalty doesn't need supervision, that commitment doesn't need to be monitored to exist. Trust like this feels less like holding on and more like standing beside. I learned to trust you by watching how you handled the things you could have ignored, the small details, the moments when no one was watching, the way you respected my boundaries without making them feel like wall. LS, the way you listened without preparing a response, the way you allowed me to change without reminding me of who I used to be. Trust beyond words lives in those choices, the ones that don't announce themselves but shape everything quietly. With you, I don't need to explain my intentions every time. You don't assume the worst when clarity takes time. You don't rush to conclusions when silence appears. That patience is rare. It creates a safety that allows honesty to exist without fear of consequence. I can tell you the truth even when it's unfinished, even when it's still forming. I can show you uncertainty without worrying that it will be used against me later. That kind of trust doesn't trap, it releases. There are parts of me that only exist because you made space for them, parts that would have stayed hidden if trust had required perfection. You never asked me to be flawless. You only asked me to be real. And in that expectation, I found the courage to stop pretending. Trust beyond words means I don't have to translate myself into something easier to accept. I don't have to soften my edges or exaggerate my strengths. I can exist as I am, knowing that understanding doesn't always need explanation. This trust doesn't erase fear, it teaches me how to move through it. Knowing you are there doesn't mean I never doubt myself, it means I don't doubt us. Even when my thoughts become heavy, even when the world feels unstable, the foundation remains. Not because we talked about IT endlessly, but because we lived it. Because trust was practiced, not promised. Because it showed up in consistency, not intensity. I trust you with my quiet thoughts, the ones that don't sound impressive, the ones that don't know where they're going yet. I trust you with my past without fearing it will define me in your eyes. I trust you with my future without needing guarantees. That kind of trust isn't blind, it's aware. It knows that people are imperfect, that days change, that emotions move, and still chooses to remain open instead of defensive. Beyond words, trust becomes a shared rhythm, a knowing, a steady presence that doesn't need constant affirmation. I don't ask myself whether you mean what you show because your actions have already answered that. I don't wonder if I matter because the way you show up makes it clear without saying it out loud. Trust like this doesn't shout its existence. It simply stays solid and quiet, holding everything we are without asking for recognition, growing deeper each time we choose honesty over fear, patience over assumption, presence over explanation, continuing in the space between us where certainty doesn't need language, where belief lives without proof, where I lean into what we share without hesitation, without needing to ask, without needing to hear it said again. There is a difference between being alone and choosing solitude. Being alone feels like something missing. Chosen solitude feels like something protected. What we share lives in that choice, not because we turned away from the world, but because we decided not to let it interfere. We didn't isolate ourselves out of fear, we stepped inward out of understanding. In a world that constantly demands attention, we chose each other quietly, without making noise about it. That choice gave our connection room to breathe. We never needed an audience. What we built wasn't meant to be explained or compared. It wasn't created to compete with other stories or to be measured by external standards. It exists in its own rhythm, at its own pace. Chosen solitude allowed us to hear that rhythm clearly, without distractions, without pressure, without the weight of expectations that don't belong to us. In that space, we didn't have to perform love, we could simply live it. There is comfort in knowing that what matters most doesn't require constant validation, that it doesn't weaken when it's not seen. Our solitude is not empty, it's intentional. It's where honesty feels natural and vulnerability feels safe. It's where conversations don't rush toward conclusions and silence doesn't feel uncomfortable. In that shared quiet, we meet each other as we are, not as we're supposed to be. We chose to keep certain things just for us. Not because they are fragile, but because they are strong enough to stand without explanation. Some moments lose their meaning when exposed to too many voices. Some feelings grow deeper when they're allowed to remain untouched. Our solitude protects those moments. It keeps them intact. It allows them to stay real instead of becoming diluted by interpretation. In this chosen space, time behaves differently. It slows down. It stops demanding progress and starts allowing presence. We don't rush each other toward clarity. We don't force decisions just to feel secure. We let things unfold naturally, trusting that what's real doesn't need to be hurried. Solitude gives us that patience. It removes the noise that confuses urgency with importance. What I value most about this solitude is that it's shared, not lonely. We stand side by side, not turned away. Even when we're quiet, there is connection. Even when we're distant from the world, there is closeness between us. This is not withdrawal, it's alignment. A mutual understanding that not everything needs to be spoken, and not everything needs to be shared. We don't disappear from the world together, we return to ourselves. In that return, we find clarity. We remember who we are without influence. We remember what matters when no one else is watching. Chosen solitude strips away pretense. It leaves only truth. And in that truth, there is strength. Strength that doesn't announce itself. Strength that doesn't seek approval. There are moments when the world feels heavy, when expectations press in from every direction. In those moments, our solitude becomes shelter, not a hiding place, but a grounding one. A place where we can rest without guilt, where we can be quiet without being misunderstood, where we can exist without needing to explain why. This solitude doesn't limit us, it defines us. It draws a boundary around what is sacred. It reminds us that intimacy doesn't grow louder with exposure, but deeper with care. What we share in this space is deliberate. Every moment kept, every word withheld, every silence honored is part of that intention. We are not distant because we lack connection. We are close because we chose to protect it. In this chosen solitude, I feel seen without being observed, known without being examined, loved without being claimed by the world. There is freedom in that. Freedom to remain authentic. Freedom to grow without interference. Freedom to stay present without distraction. This is where our connection remains untouched by noise, unchanged by opinion, steady in its quiet existence, continuing to live between us without needing proof, without seeking permission, without reaching for anything beyond what it already is. Some things last because they are spoken often, repeated until they become familiar. And then there are things that last because they are never spoken at all. What we carry belongs to that second kind. It doesn't rely on reminders or declarations. It doesn't need to be named to stay real. It lives quietly, steady, and unchanged because it was never exposed to the wear and tear of explanation. Forever unspoken doesn't mean forgotten, it means preserved. There is a truth between us that doesn't ask to be translated into words. The moment it became language, it would lose part of its depth. Words have edges. They define, limit, categorize. What we share is wider than that. It moves freely because it isn't contained. It exists in the way we understand each other without interruption, in the way a single look can replace a long conversation, in the way we sense shifts in each other without needing confirmation. I've learned that some bonds weaken when they're constantly talked about. They become performances instead of realities. Ours avoided that fate by staying unspoken, not out of fear but out of confidence. Confidence that it doesn't need proof, confidence that it won't disappear if it isn't announced. Confidence that silence can hold just as much truth as any promise ever could. What remains unspoken between us is not unfinished. It is complete in its own way. It doesn't need closure because it was never open-ended, it simply is. It doesn't ask for definition because it doesn't need one to exist. In a world that demands clarity, we chose understanding instead. That choice gave what we share a kind of permanence that words often fail to protect. There are moments when I could speak it out loud, when the opportunity presents itself, when the setting feels right, when the silence almost invites sound. And still I don't. Not because I can't, but because I don't need to. You already know. And knowing without hearing is sometimes the deepest form of connection. It means we are aligned beyond expression. It means what we share lives at a level where language no longer reaches. Forever unspoken doesn't fade with time. If anything, it becomes stronger, untouched by misinterpretation, unchanged by repetition. It stays pure because it stays ours. Every day we choose not to explain it to the world, we choose to protect it. Every time we let it exist without naming it, we allow it to remain exactly what it was meant to be. There is no urgency in what we haven't said, no pressure building up behind silence. The quiet between us isn't holding back an explosion of words. It's holding steady, calm, certain. What is unspoken isn't waiting for release. It's already at rest, already settled, already understood. I don't measure this connection by milestones or moments of declaration. I measure it by consistency, by how it shows up without being summoned, by how it remains even when nothing is happening, by how it survives distance, time, distraction, and change without needing reassurance. That endurance comes from being unspoken, from not being tied to a moment or a sentence, but to an understanding that moves with us. Sometimes the strongest commitment is the one that doesn't announce itself, the one that doesn't ask to be witnessed, the one that stays private not because it's fragile, but because it's foundational. What we share has become part of how I move through the world. It doesn't interrupt my life, it supports it, quietly, constantly, without needing recognition. Forever unspoken means it isn't confined to a memory of when it was said. It doesn't belong to the past or to a specific moment in time. It exists now and it continues without needing renewal. It adapts without being redefined. It stays present without demanding attention. That's how it lasts. That's how it remains untouched. There is a peace in knowing that some things don't need to be resolved through conversation. That understanding can exist without negotiation. That closeness doesn't require confirmation. This unspoken truth rests between us like something solid and dependable. Not heavy, not fragile, just there, always there. And as time moves forward, as life shifts and reshapes us, what remains unspoken moves with us, not trailing behind, not pushing ahead, but staying exactly where it belongs. Between us, quiet, certain, enduring,